Our brief is in two parts. The first will be delivered by the minister responsible for finance, supported by his deputy, and it focuses on the Agyapa Royalties transaction that the government of Ghana is currently embarking on, and seeks to provide some more answers to the questions that have come up. When we are done, we will take questions on that transaction, and Minister and his team will excuse while the Ghana Health Service gives us a quick update on where we are on COVID matters. Let's also mention, colleagues, that where your cameras are mounted, exactly where the screen for the presentation is. So once we get into the PowerPoint presentation, we'll have to create some space so that we can have an opportunity to see the details. Just a quick introduction. The Minister responsible for finance, I'm sure you're familiar with, the Honorable Ken Oforiatta is here. His deputy, the Honorable Charles Edubu, is here. The Honorable Miriku Duka is chairman of the Mineral Incomes Investment Fund, and there are a number of other dignitaries who are here with us. I'll introduce them to you, of course. Mr. Yalban is here with us. That's the chief executive of the MIIF. We have Mr. Kofi Osafo-Mafu, who is a consultant on the project currently. He's here with us. And then the Ghana Health Service team that will do another brief when we are done with this first one is also here, Dr. Pekaboji and his team. So, Minister, I'll yield to you for your introductory comments as we start.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the ministry this afternoon. As Honorable Kojo mentioned, we're going to have the presentation in two parts. I will really just give sort of an overview of the whole issue of gold in our country. Then Charles will go through some detailed presentation which will answer most concerns and issues, and then we'll throw it out for Q&A, will enable us to dig deeper into that. But I think for starters, I just want to put the country in readiness to reimagine what we've been doing for 60 years and where we want to go as a country. So for centuries, the reality has been our governments and our people get far less than what we deserve. We are placed at the bottom of the list of the beneficiaries for our own riches, whether it is gold, cocoa, timber, oil, bauxite, or diamonds. The story has been the same everywhere. This is predominantly to do with the fact that our value extraction ends the point at which these resources leave our shores. Unfortunately, analysis undertaken over an extended period has shown that the largest increase in value occurs at exactly this point when it leaves our shores, where raw resources leave the country and is converted into either refined products or monetizable securities. 500 times more gold is traded every day than is mined. Much of this happening in countries that have very little gold themselves. President Akufo-Addo is clear in his mind that to achieve a Ghana beyond aid, we must add considerable value to what we produce and trade. We often fail to see this value because when assessing the effectiveness of our policies and legislation, we limit the extent of our expectation to our national borders. We take no interest in what happens to our resources when they leave our shores, whether it be how they are traded in foreign markets, how companies leverage them to create cheap financing, or the different ways in which they are utilized to generate profit. The value chain includes the international stock market, where incidentally virtually all the foreign investors who are involved in the extractive industry in Ghana are also operating. In assessing value we receive, we often focus on the metrics such as the percentage of government taking and tax as the only means of assessing the value that is retained by the resource owner ourselves. This type of analysis ignores many of the differing ways in which the companies that extract the resource utilize their rights beyond and outside of our borders as a means of creating value, specifically leveraging that value to those who do not want to invest directly in our country but do want access to resources and have access to capital that could help us to both accelerate our development and diversify our economy. This desire to domesticate our expectations when operating in a global market only acts to hurt and limit developing economies. The NPP government is determined to break our economy free from these old boundaries. If the foreign investor can use the coverable reserves in our country, he has in a concession granted us to him to raise money, which he can choose to spend here or on other businesses he has elsewhere. Why can't we do the same to maximize the benefit we get and use that additional income to accelerate our development and by so doing expand our economy? A further significant part of this is due to our inability to leverage the most important element of risk value, future cash flows. Companies utilize their access to our concessions and future resources as a means to invest in new exploration, new development, technology, diversification, and ultimately to reduce their cost of borrowing. We can leverage these same parties who give companies funding, but first we need to acknowledge that those with access to capital are not limited to our public institutions. Gold companies, oil companies, or cocoa companies. In most cases, the vast majority of those entities are willing to pay a premium for access to our resources exist beyond our borders, and therefore we need to create structures that allow us to access their funding. If we don't do that, we allow ourselves to remain captives of the international companies that take our resources and simply market them to the same groups that we choose to ignore. There are those who say we should be careful not to mortgage or sell today the gold in the ground for future generations. First of all, this is not the case, but I have two questions for those who raise these concerns. If it is okay for the foreign investor who holds a concession to sell what is in the ground upfront, then why not us? More importantly, why is it okay to borrow today for the future and not good to use our resources to leverage assets for tomorrow? We must be creative to extend our sources of raising income to support our development. We are in a hurry to catch up. Every year, every generation we wait, we keep millions of people and families stuck in the abyss of poverty and sufferings. If we want to increase our share of the global pie, it sometimes means creating new innovative structures that give direct access to the natural resource in a manner that is open and transparent and operate in accordance with laws that exist outside of our own country. That is why listed oil companies that operate in Africa can raise capital at levels closer to the European companies where they are based and not countries where they operate. They create structures that force the investors' exposures on the commodity, not the country. This opens up new areas of funding. The tactic of compartmentalizing and separating perceived risks of actual risk has helped flawed companies to create more value from our resources than the governments and people who own the resources themselves. We only need to look at tallow, recently damaged by corporate problems and yet still able to raise low-price bonds in the midst of the economic crisis and able to do so at a rate lower than the government of Ghana, from whom it receives its mandate to extract resources. This is the case even at a time where our government is raising funding at historically low levels when compared to our predecessors. So it is time to reimagine our future. We all, by now, must be tired by being cheated by foreign companies, and we're restraining ourselves from using the same vehicles that they use. We have to maximize value of our income that is due the Republic from the mineral wealth that we have for the benefit of our citizens, and that is the prime objective of the MIIF, to maximize the value of the income due the Republic from the mineral wealth of the country for the benefit of our people. So we are really excited about the listing of Agyapa in London by the end of the year. It creates the first royalty company of that nature in Africa. It is really sad that for a country that has been mining gold since the 15th century with the Portuguese, we still don't have any international listed company, either in gold or even in cocoa. This must come to an end, and we believe it's a strong statement to register Ghana's presence going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for the opening comments. Colleagues, I'm going to ask you to make some space available so that we can all pay attention to the screen. The Honorable Charles Edubuahin, Deputy Minister responsible for Finance, is going to take us through a little presentation or a short presentation on this transaction. It is because as far back as 2018, the government of Ghana, in furtherance of its objectives and with full transparency, went to Parliament to lay out the roadmap for this type of transaction by putting in place a law and spelling out how any such transaction should be executed. Some of the conversations currently going on suggest that a good number of people may have missed all of that exercise that was done, whether in Parliament or in the public domain. There are also a lot of people out there who genuinely still have some misconceptions about what is going on. And so the Honorable Edubuahin will take us through a presentation, and then after that, we will take some questions. Honorable Charles Edubuahin.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Microphone.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Rearrange, okay. Are we good? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, thanks so much for coming. I'm hoping we can clarify a lot of the questions out there by the end of the day, by the time we are done with the presentation and the Q&A session that will follow. Agyapa Royalties is a pretty straightforward transaction. It just happens to be quite novel on this side of the world, and I think that is what is creating quite a little bit of confusion. So hopefully we can clarify it and set our minds at ease. So if we go to the next page, great, we'll start here. So what is Agyapa Royalties? Essentially, Agyapa Royalties is a gold royalty company. Gold royalty companies have existed for a while, and their main purpose is to offer financing to gold mining companies that want to develop new projects in exchange for royalty or revenue-related streams once the mine starts producing. As you all know, gold exploration is quite a risky business. But once you've got your concession and you've done your exploration and you've determined that there is some gold somewhere in the ground, you have to go through a whole series of steps, including having a consultant come and do an assessment, till you get to a point that is known as your bankable feasibility stage, where the resource has been confirmed. At that point, you are ready to, depending on the size of the resource, you are ready to develop mine. But it takes quite a lot of money to actually develop the mine to production. So gold royalty companies come into play there because they are sought by mine owners to provide financing needed to develop these mines to production. Once they pass the exploration stage, it's been fairly de-risked because there's confirmed that there's gold there. Now it's just a matter of putting in place the infrastructure to extract that gold out of the ground. So gold mining royalty companies then come in at that point and say, okay, sure, I will give you X amount, and in exchange for that, once you start producing and selling the gold, you pay me 5% royalties on the revenue you generate. It's as simple as that. Royalty companies also may buy royalty flows from an already producing mine in exchange for cash upfront. That is the main purpose. So this will be, however, the first royalty company that will be an African one. There are several, but they are based in other parts of the world. As you can see here, we have Win, which has a market capitalization of 23.4 billion. I believe is listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. Samsung market cap of 1.7 billion. Osico market cap 1.9 billion. Royal Gold Inc. market cap of 9 billion. Franco-Nevada market capitalization of 28 billion. So these are big companies. These are serious companies in meanness. The reason why I've also included PE multiple here is for a simple reason. PE stands for price to earnings ratio. Sorry if I'm getting too technical, but it is important. Essentially, what it means is that the price of the share price divided by your earnings share. And if a PE ratio says 49 times, that means that an investor is prepared to give you $1 today for, give you $49 today for $1 in earnings in the future. So basically, if let's say he's giving you $50 today for $1 in earnings in the future, that's actually a 2% return. He's essentially happy to get a 2% return. So it shows you that these companies are trading at multiples that are several times the earnings potential that they provide. But people like them because they are safe bets, they are sure bets. You know, gold is quite a predictable commodity, and once you're mining, you know, it's pretty straightforward, especially if the mine operator is very experienced. If you compare the multiples to pure gold mining companies like Newmont and so forth, you realize that they trade PE multiples much lower. Maybe, I think most Africa mining companies today listed trade in the mid-teens, 15 times PE multiples, which means that in their case, people are demanding a lot more in return for them. So if you list one of these companies, you can get a valuation that is much higher than if you were just playing a direct gold mining play. So just wanted you to see this to understand this is nothing new. There are several of them all over the world. Most of them have exposure not only to gold royalties but other minerals as well. Can we move to the next page, please? So what is the rationale for the transaction? The main objective here is to create and launch Africa's first gold royalty company and showcase Ghana as the premier destination for gold assets and resources mining, whilst raising non-debt funding capital investment. We believe this will attract investment into the sector, increase exploration activity, provide financing to owners of mining concessions looking for equity-type financing to develop mines, and bring them to production, thereby creating jobs, rural development, and of course generating taxes for the government as you have more companies coming to the mining sector. In fact, we believe that through this transaction, by the time we are done with the roadshow, everybody will know about Ghana, will know about Ghana Gold, and about how rich we are in resources. And it's going to raise questions with every investor looking, look, they want to come to Ghana to see the opportunities that are here. I never knew that Ghana had such rich opportunities. I'm sure not all of us even know that as of now, Ghana is the #1 gold producer on the continent. And you know, for a country that was previously known as the Gold Coast, we really have not capitalized on that brand that we have naturally have. I didn't even know that we've been mining gold since the 15th century, but that goes to show that, really, this is something that's part and parcel of the whole Ghanaian entity. Moving on, there's a lot of questions being asked about the name change. And when we initially incorporated, we agreed that we wanted to incorporate offshore because we wanted to list on one of the larger stock exchanges, preferably the London Stock Exchange, because then we attract the most investment, the most people will look at the shares and be interested in buying the company as compared to listing on the Ghanaian Stock Exchange, which will limit your investor pool. And also the depth of the London Stock Exchange is much deeper than the Ghanaian Stock Exchange. So we agreed that we'll do a dual listing. And then the next question was, we need to domicile the entity in a jurisdiction that will provide the ability for the royalties not to be taxed again, because royalties in itself is a tax. So then if we tax it again, we will then be taxing it twice. So we engaged the services of a PR company to identify names for us, a short list of names that we should call this entity. And they came up with 3 names, of which Asase was one of them. So when we incorporated in Jersey, decided to incorporate in Jersey, we did a name check in Jersey and realized there were no names by that, no companies by that name, so we were pretty good to go. And the reason we liked Asase was that, gold comes from the earth, it, depicted, where the gold was coming from. However, and this was back in 2018 when we were structuring the whole transaction. Somewhere along the line, our transaction advisors recommended that we would need to have, would have to have a subsidiary in Ghana where the royalties will first flow to before they are transferred abroad. So we needed to incorporate Asase Ghana Limited. When we tried to do that, that is when we found out from the Registrar General that there were over 20 companies that had the name Asase, including some that were already in the mining sector. And we felt that would be a big problem if we're going to go and list a company with the same name. Anybody will do a Google search already, they don't know Africa, they don't know Ghana too well, and then all these names come up and they may be confused. So we thought that, look, just to remove any doubt or uncertainty, we should look to change the name. And because of that, we looked around and we came up with Agyapa, which is essentially Agyapade, which felt that we shorten so that white friends can easily pronounce it, but also that it retains its Ghanaian personality and entity. And so that is how this whole came about. I mean, it's not complicated, pretty straightforward situation. It's amazing how people can find ways to twist a simple situation. So moving on. What do we want to use the money for? Really and truly, we want to focus on investing in 4 broad key areas: primary capital expenditures in education, in health, in housing, and in infrastructure. We would like to upgrade existing schools in the mining areas, University of Mines and Technology. Maybe the idea to maybe look to see if we can enhance their operations, maybe help them set up a jewelry training or jewelry design course, so that we can create more value add along the gold chain. But just the whole gold value chain, we want to be able to go further up the value chain and not just find the raw ore and export it in its raw form. We need to be able to build refineries to refine the ore and do more value add. On the health side, it's all about resilience. This pandemic has showed us how important it is to make sure that we have health facilities across the length and breadth of the country, and especially in these mine areas where these miners always are running at the risk of their lives in these conditions. On the housing side, I think also the pandemic has showed us the importance of housing across the whole country, and we believe that it will be a good use of the monies to self-support some of our initiatives on the housing sector. Then also the road infrastructure. There's a lot of roads in these mining areas. In fact, a few of the mining companies have, as part of their social corporate responsibility, down the roads or improve the roads, but also for their own use because they use them. And a lot of heavy trucks ply these routes because of these mines, and it's important that these roads are kept in good condition in order to attract investment into these areas. I know my chairman Duka here is smiling because he's from Takwa, so he appreciates, the need for all these initiatives. We also would like to support the new development bank we're setting up, which is going to be used primarily for development, and also GIF, which is the Ghana Infrastructure Fund. So on to the next page. So why issue equity in a company instead of raising debt? I would like to use the example of the road fund transaction that was done by our predecessors. Essentially, the royalty company or a royalty deal is a form of securitization. Essentially, what we are doing with this deal is that we are we are issuing shares for a lump of money today in exchange for future royalty streams. So we are saying, look, give me CDs today, and from next year onwards, I'll give you 50 pesos a year. And you can securitize any predictable cash flow streams, and that is what our predecessors tried to do with the road fund levies. However, they decided to do a transaction. They borrowed about, I believe it was 1 billion CDs for 3 years, and encumbered almost all our road fund levies, get that back. Their interest rate was over 30%. And so what happened was that when we came in, we didn't have a dime left in the coffers and the road fund to be able to maintain and do our roads, because all the money had been encumbered towards, this road fund. So this is a totally different structure where it is not a loan, it's equity. We are selling shares. You buy shares in a company, we don't have to pay the money back. I've got a lot of questions where people say, if you raise the 500 million, we understand the difference, but when do you pay the 500 million back? We don't pay it back, the shareholders are now shareholders in an operating good concern that will be operating, and once if they generate a profit, they will pay out dividends. If they don't generate profit, they won't pay out any dividends. The shareholders are prepared to take that risk because they believe in the capacity and the capability of the company. It's very important that we understand that the royalty company is a good concern, is a company that will have a management team, is a company that will be actively working, going out and identifying prospects that they can invest in, and royalty streams that they can buy. It is my understanding that in Ghana alone, there are over 30 prospective concessions that people have done some exploration work and have firmed the resource, but are just don't have the funding to be able to develop the mine. So there's already a lot of opportunities there for the royalty company to get to work. So there are going to be a going concern that is do work, and of which government will still be a 50% shareholder. So it's really not a situation where we've given away anything. We've actually just created an entity, moved our flows into the entity to be able to develop a Pan-African player, given the multiples at which similar companies trade. It's like turning $1 in royalty flows today into 30 or 60 by virtue of the fact that we are listing it, and investors believing in the huge prospects that what gold has to offer will be prepared to participate in it. So that's essentially the reason why we are doing this, and we are actioning it as an equity transaction rather than a debt transaction. Also, I should have said in the previous slide that the current market conditions also have made it challenging for debt transactions, even if we were to think about that. Capital markets are closed internationally. Even if you were to try and raise money, you pay 200-300% more, 3% or 2 or 3% more in interest than you'd have paid the same time last year. So moving on to the next page. And also, gold is one of the few commodities that seem to have performed well in this pandemic. I think there's a flight to gold as people have seen interest rates come down in the West, and so gold has become quite an attractive commodity, as you see when we get to the share price graph. This is a graph to show how much exactly we are making from royalties. The green bars at the very bottom show you the exchange rate that was applied, that you can apply to the numbers. The numbers you have the 103 million, 132, 133, 144 are the royalty flows for the particular 12 mines that are being assigned to Agyapa. And the orange bars are supposed to be the total royalty flows that come to government. So this is in total, including the other mines, royalties from the other mines that have not been assigned to Agyapa. However, sorry, I think that those numbers should be cedis, not in dollars. So this is essentially where we are today. Now, the top line is the average gold prices that you see, which was 1,200 in 2016, 1,002, about the same in 2017, and about the same in 2018. 2019 it crept up, but in this year we are looking at, I think it was 2,000. So prices have gone up quite well. And you see that is also reflected in the royalties that have jumped quite a bit between 2018 and 2019. So I'm sure in 2020 we'll see a little higher in terms of the revenue receipts. Next page, please. I think we've gone through this already, but these are some of the other reasons why they issue equity in a company instead of raising debt. And then also, if we go back to the page, I think a key issue here is the benefit government will get from the underlying capital appreciation of the shares. If the management of Agyapa do what they used to do, we can see the market cap of that company doubling or tripling in a year or two. I think, in fact, most gold companies are up 50% or 100% year on year. I'll have to check from my equity guys, but because of the price of gold, we've seen a lot of appreciation in gold shares. And if the same thing was to happen with Agyapa, we'll see that capital appreciation, and because Ghana government will still be a 50 plus 1% shareholder, will benefit directly from the performance of the underlying asset. Next page, please. So what happens? How is this going to work? So government of Ghana has created a mineral income investment fund, which is a government-owned entity. GRA collects the mineral royalties from the mining companies, for which they take a fee, pass those mineral royalties on to the mineral income investment fund, which then pass them on to Agyapa Royalties in Jersey. But first, before they do that, they take out 20% and give it to the Minerals Development Fund, which is used for various areas within our gold mining areas. But we'll come to that to show you how exactly that is allocated. And so the remaining 80%, less fees and expenses to GRA and the Incomes Fund, goes to Agyapa Royalties. Agyapa Royalties determines, given the operations for the year, how much they will pay out in dividends to their shareholders, which includes Minerals Income Fund, of course, and how much they use for new investments in projects and so on. Typically, mineral royalty companies pay out about 30% outflows to the companies in dividends. We are looking at a little richer payout ratio of closer to 50%, but that depends on the board of Agyapa and what they have on their plate at any time in terms of new prospects. But we anticipate that in the beginning, due to the flurry of activity, new investments, because they already have a pipeline of deals that they've identified, we'll see a lower payouts ratio, and going forward that might increase over time. Next page. The Minerals Development Fund, so takes 20% of the royalty flows. Agyapa will then take 75.6. GRA, as I said, keeps its fee of 2.4, and Minerals Income Investment Fund itself retains a fee of 2% to cover its operations. So this is what will happen now. Previously, 80% would have gone to the consolidated fund and disappeared into the budget year on year. So, as I said, the statement that traditional authorities lose right to royalties is untrue. We should have put that right so that you could see it, but I hope it's clear. Next page, please. What does the Mineral Development Fund do with the 20% it receives? 50% of it goes to the Office of the Administrator of Stool Lands, 20% to the Mining Committee Development Scheme, 4% supplement the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, 30% supplements the Minerals Commission, 8% out of this 20% supplements the Geological Survey Department, and 5% goes to research, training, and projects aimed at promotion of sustainable development through mining. Why the listing in Ghana and London? Listing will provide transparency and introduce a high level of corporate governance, which is a mandatory requirement for companies that are listed on the London Stock Exchange and most exchanges for that matter. The London is one of the major stock markets for listed mining companies. Is in order to realize maximum value for the share being sold, London is the ideal way to ensure there's a listing in London. Canada is also another destination, but that's quite far. I think we're all used to London, and it's just as effective as Canada is. And also, the London Stock Exchange is deep. I think the market cap of the London Stock Exchange is over here. I think is about $3.2 trillion dollars. And the aim, which is also in London, is another 115 billion. The number of companies that are listed on the UK Stock Exchange but that are incorporated and domiciled in Jersey, which is in the Channel Islands, is over 1,200 companies from over 60 countries. So, I mean, Jersey is a known destination for incorporating companies that want to be listed on London. In fact, we work very closely with the Jersey and the office of in the Prime Minister's office in London with regard to getting the clearance to make sure that we could use Jersey as the place for incorporation. And the UK government is really very supportive of Jersey incorporated entity because they benefit, because most of these companies end up being listed on the London Stock Exchange. And so there's that mutual cooperative relationship between the two destinations. A lot of people have asked, why Jersey? Jersey is a tax haven, and tax havens seem to have earned a reputation for dodgy activities. That's very unfortunate. I think, like all things in life, you can use things for a good purpose, or you can decide to use it for bad. It all depends on your thinking and how you think. And anybody who thinks that you're using it for something naughty, he himself knows why he thinks that. We used it because it was the most tax efficient avenue to use. If we had decided to transfer the royalties to Agyapa that was domiciled in Ghana, we would have ended up in a situation where we would be paying tax twice, because the royalty flows itself isn't a tax. It would have come to Agyapa as a company incorporated in Ghana as a revenue stream. It would then come out as an income, profit after tax. So that profit will be taxed before then you get your net income will then come out. And that will be a 25% tax. Same thing you had incorporated in the UK itself. We would have moved, let's say, $100 in royalties from here to the UK entity Agyapa. It would have gone in there as revenue. It would have then paid out the shareholders. So by routing this through Jersey, the 100 comes in the same 100 less whatever operating expenses there are noticed, which means that the shareholders are getting the full benefit of 100 that of royalties, which also means that the valuation that they'll put on the company will be 25% higher than if this was domiciled in a tax jurisdiction, meaning that with the valuation that Ghana will get for this entity will be 25% higher essentially. Next slide, please. We just thought we should show Ghana companies on the Ghana Stock Exchange that are in gold. I was surprised to notice that I think there were only two. There was another one called New Gold, something I didn't seem to have any information. And so really, and the Anglo Gold, I think the main listing is on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and this is out a merger between Ashanti Gold Fields, Ashanti Gold Company, and Anglo Gold. So these are the two companies that are actively trading on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Market cap of the stock exchange is 52.7 billion Ghana cedis, which includes quite a bit from secondary listings, including Tallow and Anglo Gold. That is just about $10 billion. That's the size of the Ghana Stock Exchange. Next page, please. What is the legislation? So when we started, or we decided to put together this transaction, we realized that we need to put in place supporting legislation. This was back at the beginning of 2018. So what we did was that we went through a procurement process to procure the services of a transaction advisor. We had about 10 or 11 bids, proposals submitted. We went through a rigorous evaluation process and listed it to one entity with a local partner. They then were tasked with looking at the whole, advising us on the best structure to use for the transaction. And through that sort of due diligence and analysis process came out the fact that we would need to pass an act to establish an entity that will be put in place to manage the royalty and the equity interest that Ghana has in its mining companies. And so we then started putting together the act. We engaged the services of lawyers to help us draft the act, submitted it to Parliament, and somewhere in 2018, it was then referred to the Finance Committee. Finance Committee went site to Aqua Safari for a weekend, went through the whole act clause by clause, and this of course involved MPs both on both sides of the aisle. And by the time we're done, we had come up with what we believed was a solid act to cover this transaction. It was then passed by Parliament and assented to, I think, in the third or fourth quarter of 2018. Once that's done, we then went on the road and had some preliminary discussions with potential investors and asset managers to see what their concerns will be. And a lot of them were concerned about government's ability to intervene and also to interfere in the operations of what was supposed to be an independent company that will be listed. So we then had to come up with various agreements, including a relationship agreement, an investment agreement, an assignment agreement, which will support the creation of this entity. So that is what we've been doing over the last 2 years. In fact, we wanted to try and get this transaction done last year. We've mentioned it in the 2018 budget that we'll be monetizing royalty streams. We also mentioned it in the 2019 budget. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to market on time, and when this year started, COVID hit, so that has also added some additional delays. So this has been a while in the making. It's something that has been very well structured, very well thought through, and we've come quite a long way. It is unfortunate that the perception is out there that there's something that was hastily put together. We have benefited from the delays though. As you can see, gold prices are now at about 1900, and these companies are their valuations directly correlated to where gold prices are. So, you know, there's a silver lining in everything. We now are sitting in a position where we can take advantage of price being at an all-time high. Next page. So these are the entities that were involved in as we went through all this. We to go to the Attorney General. They went through every line in all the agreements. Minerals Commission actually has somebody who sits on the Minerals Investment Fund board. The Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources has been very involved. They had to ratify all the mining leases for the companies that were whose royalties were going to assign. Bank of Ghana, of course, because they had to give us permission to get the dollars or have a company that, you know, was receiving dollars. And of course JRA, because they are the ones who collect the royalties. And so we've had a lot of engagements. We've also met with the mining companies to explain to them how the act will work and how their payment is going to change in terms of who they're paying to. And of course the Minerals Development. Next page, please. I think we've spoken about the benefits already. We'll receive dividends, capital appreciation, and the ability of Agyapa will be to be able to now rapidly invest in new mines and bring them on a lot faster. And we aim to really create a Pan-African Fortune 500 company with Ghanaian roots. Next steps. Prospectus approved by the regulators in Accra. The virtual global roadshow will commence after that. company will be listed in London and Ghana. The company is currently 100% owned by government. It's only after listing that we would have other shareholders come in. Based on the valuation we get during the IPO, which will be by a book building process, we may end up only having to sell 30% of the company to generate the 500 million we are hoping to raise, or we may have to sell 35%. Depends on the valuation, but whatever the case may be, government insists on retaining majority shareholding of 51% in the company. Thank you. There was supposed to be a graph of gold prices. What happened to it? Anyway, so that's it. I think in summary, that's the presentation. Thank you very much.
Honorable Abin, thank you for the presentation. Colleagues, just a couple of things I'd like to trade before we take the questions. Can we get the other microphone for the questions? While we do that, just a few things. So I'm sure you've noticed in recent days suggestions that this whole transaction is opaque and it is rushed. That suggestion, with the greatest of respect, is incorrect. As the Honorable Minister and his deputy have just demonstrated, as far back as 2018, even the way we want to structure this was sent to Parliament, debated clause by clause, and passed as an act of Parliament. And then when the specific transaction started, all the agreements, I think about 5 different agreements supporting it, the assignment agreement and all of those ones, laid in Parliament. I have my copies as a Member of Parliament. Every Member of Parliament on the Finance Committee and every Member of Parliament who was in the chamber has piece of the reports of the committee that met on all these agreements. So there's been full transparency. Again, it's not been under certificate of urgency or anything as far back as 2018 when the process started till now. So that suggestion, I think we have to be very categorical, is incorrect, with the greatest of respect. Secondly, there's a suggestion that there are some hidden owners of the company behind the scenes. I'm sure you've heard the expression beneficial owners. That who are the beneficial owners? Disclose them. As has been explained, the government of Ghana, by this Act of Parliament, Act 978, set up the Mineral Income Investment Fund, 100% by GOG. MIIF is 100% the owner of this company. It's when they get to the stage of doing a prospectus, listing on the market, and selling some shares that some prospective investors, nobody knows who they could be, just like how all companies listed, may come in. And that's a full transparent process out there. It's important that these points, and as you carry the news, you make point for everybody to understand quite clearly. We'll take your questions now, and the Honorable Minister and his deputy and some of my colleagues here will help to provide responses. When we are done with this part of the brief, and then the Minister and his colleagues leave us, the Ghana Health Service will update us on where we are on COVID. Gakpo, are you wearing your mask? Okay. So, 2, 3, let's take first 3. Yes, Joseph, let's go.
So, first of all, if Agyapa will be this profitable and in the end it will benefit the state this much, why the need to want to sell the 9% of the stake in it? Why don't you wait for the investments to mature and then eventually the nation will benefit from whatever those resources? That's my first question. The second one, as finance minister who is encouraging people to pay their taxes, and I'm sure under such a scenario you would additionally encourage people, or for that matter discourage people from saving their resources in taxing, don't you think incorporating this company in the taxing would end up rather encouraging other individuals to want to do same as a way to probably dodge taxes and protect their money? And then thirdly, Africa Legal Associates, which we know is actually owned by someone who is your family member, Mr. Finance Minister. Just as you mentioned, Kofi Asafo, Honorable Oponkoma, he said that Kofi Asafo is a consultant to the project. We know has the senior minister as the father. Mr. Finance Minister, don't you think that such a situation of people who are directly related to yourself and the senior minister involved in the deal will end up creating conflicts of interest situations? Thank you.
So, just to be clear, you're saying that if it is this profitable, why don't we wait for the investments to mature? Right? Joseph, okay, so you may want to deal with that, assuming there are some investments we are even talking about which should mature. And then what do you make of questions that there could be potential conflict of interest and its impact on encouraging people to save resources in savings? Yes, sir.
Yes. I want to know how the percentage of royalties that is targeted at fighting climate change or environmental degradation, as because we are talking of mining here, so that I would like to know how much, what has gone into that percentage, that component of environmental and even our environment, our water bodies and all that.
Are you asking, sorry sir, are you asking whether,
to know the percentage?
just trying to get some clarity, take your time. Are you asking whether, in terms of the usage of royalties today, in the old structure, there's a percentage that is allocated for fighting climate change? Is that the question you're asking?
Not exactly. I want to know whether with Agyapa we actually have made a deliberate effort to look at the environment, because we are going to the extractive industry. Definitely it's repercussion on the environment.
Okay, so in the new structure,
the new structure.
Is there anything to deal with?
Exactly.
Very well.
And what has gone into that? Now, my other one, we are looking at Agyapa trying to take about 75%, if I got it right, from the beginning slides. If Agyapa making about 75% out of the royalties, isn't that too much? Because if you look at concessionaires, we say that at the end of the day they'll be able to access, resources to explore.
Please take that question.
Agyapa, we are saying, I think if I got it right from the beginning slides, that it's going to benefit about 5% or so. There's a figure of 75% or so. And if that is the case,
of the royalties.
For the royalties,
yes.
I'm thinking that thing could skew, the benefits so much to one direction. So that you bring the concessionaires in the picture.
Which concessionaires are we talking about?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are looking at concessionaires going to benefit.
Have you said anything
about
concessionaires? Is it not going to
benefit concessionaires? People who are concessions and...
you mean the operators of the gold mine?
Exactly.
Yes, but the operators of the gold mine operate their mine and then they pay a royalty.
Okay.
It's the royalties that are being restructured. So it has nothing to do with the operators of the mine. They would still pay their royalties anyway. Okay, so, and then there was a third one here. So the question from him, the first one is, in the new structure and the usage of funds, do we have any contemplation for climate-related activities? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Sanafri from GH1 TV. So in the spirit of transparency, in the spirit of transparency, you already mentioned the processes that you went through before implementing this. But some of the corporate social organizations, especially in the extractive sector, they mentioned that they were not quite consulted in the process. We see that when in the licensing round, for example, they are a very vital part of the process. So I was wondering if this is something that you're willing to consider. Oil and gas licensing round, yeah. So I'm wondering if this is something that you considered, and for future activities, would this be something that you'd be willing to put on the table if you didn't consider it the last time? Thank you.
So, Minister, let me just answer that question. Beyond the advertisement of the book publicly, the engagement of Parliament and by extent the entire country, is there any further consultation that you missed? Especially coming from the background that some CSOs are saying that they should have been consulted, correct? And were not consulted. If you want to add that to that one, so you want to provide us with answers.
Let me try and maybe reduce the choleric level. Sometimes I feel people sound really agitated with the question. I think really you look at how this government has managed the economy and the skill set that the president has put at the Ministry of Finance. So you can see how we were able, when we came and there was no resources, we're able to get about $2.2 billion into the economy, which really helped stabilize what we were doing. Gone on to do some of the largest bonds on the continent. Our ratings have gradually become much better, and we continue, at least this year, to also have gone to the market at the right time, and that's both instinct and knowledge. I think some of the people were saying, I mean, I think I've been in the capital market business since 1984, when I finished college, beginning to date myself. And Charles has also been in the capital market business. So truly, you know, it's a point in time in which our leadership is both has the knowledge, understanding of the markets that are there, the type of resources that are leveraged to be able to do that. And really that's what we are bringing to bear. And I suppose you can judge us by what we have done during that period. So I'm trying to understand your question about the investment maturing. What do you mean by that? I mean, essentially what we have done is to say we are getting some royalties every year, maybe $150 million. You know, there are some major things we have to do as a country which demands big capital. What do you do to be able to securitize that, leverage that? But even in so doing, you are also going to be receiving those royalties on a regular basis, and therefore the dividends would also come to us. So suddenly you've opened a way in which you can do that. But the other interesting aspect is that given that you are going to have this type of money, it also enables you to be able to look at royalties and concessions in other parts of the continent, to be able to then build this unique Ghanaian gold company that then takes advantage of all the resources on the continent. So I think there needs to be, you know, maybe a reduction in the cynicism to understand that what we are doing is really to promote where Ghana needs to go and where it used to be. I think the issue of taxes, you know, it's in a sense, is almost like being more Catholic than the Pope. You know, the world consists of all sorts structures to be able to generate resources. Okay. Now, if I therefore need to go to the London Stock Exchange, I want my company being taxed twice. And it's not, you know, an issue of I'm doing something wrong. And therefore, you use that platform to be able to do that so that we get our money back to us. Are there ways in which people legitimately use tax laws to be able to reduce taxes? Yes, they do. Now, you have to make sure that it's within above the spirit and that you are not getting wrong. So I think that's what we should do. So yes, we are very confident that this is the way to go. We have done enough of these type of transactions. We have seen how foreign companies benefit from our resources, and we just sit staring at them. And I think it is time to reimagine the future, you know, to put our stamp on understanding that these things are ours and we are going to get the best out of them. And there are two markets. There's the physical market and the virtual market, or the stock market. And we never seem to go there to do that. So I don't see anything really wrong with what we are doing. I don't know, Charles, do you want to follow through on some questions I've missed here?
Is there any part of the new structure that is climate change?
Yeah. Regards to climate change, sorry, I believe that is addressed with the 20% that goes to the Minerals Development Fund. They have a bucket there that deals with environmental degradation, climate change, or environmental issues. Yeah. And then there was also a question about conflicts. with regards to LA, my response to that, and I've been asked already, is that firstly, ALA happens to be the local partner for the English law firm that we're using on this transaction, White and Case. So they work hand in hand with them. So they came in with White and Case as their local partners. We're also using Bella, which is also another law firm. And the gentleman in question that was read to happens to be a partner in ALA. But there are several other partners, and it's a partnership. These law firms are set up as partnerships. And the partner we're working with on this is another partner altogether, not a gentleman in question. So really, we didn't see any conflicts there at all. And to be honest, when you're working on such a transaction and you want to be listed on the London Stock Exchange, they're very particular and extremely diligent in their due diligence, even to the extent of looking at all your advisors, transaction advisors, to ensure that they're comfortable with them and are very and clear that there are no conflicts whatsoever there as well. Oh, and also to deal with my good friend Kofi Osafo for the selection process. We engaged as part of, when we started this in 2018, as part of the whole process, we also engaged a headhunting firm, and the firm is called Conferry, Kornferry. They are based out of California. They are a global headhunting firm, and we asked them to help us identify and shortlist a candidate for the CEO position, for the CFO position for Agyapa, and also for the board. And they scoured the whole globe. We said our preference for the Ghanaian, for the CEO position, that it should be a Ghanaian, and ideally also for the chairman of the board. We also wanted very strong operators who were experienced and had a background in mining. I think there were over 30 or so candidates that were eventually shortlisted that were brought to us. Of that, 6 were Ghanaian, and he happened to be one of the 6. He also happened to be working by then with SNET. So we then said, okay, he was a good prospect, but until such time as we got to the listing stage, we would engage him as a consultant, especially then be able to exactly see if he would bring the right value to the table and was able enough to do the job. His background was a right fit. He happened to have been in the asset management business, being a equity research analyst covering gold and mining and energy stocks. So in London, and worked for some of the biggest asset management firms, investment management firms that we know of. And that position, not only did he have the technical knowledge of mining, but he also had the financial knowledge. And most importantly, because he interacted with investors on a daily basis, he had a good appreciation for what investors will be looking for in purchasing an asset such as this. And going forward, in managing the company, he would have a nose for the right type of investments to make and the conditions around which to make them, which it is a very key part of this whole story, because once you're going to market, the investors are going to look at your management team and need to be convinced that this is the team that knows what they are doing, will be able to identify the right assets and the mining companies to back forward, because that's where the value is going to accrue and the capital is going to appreciate. So that was the reason. It was just that. It just happened to be a coincidence that he happens to be somebody we know and happens to be a relative of somebody who is already in the government. I happen to also know him because we went to the same school. He was a year ahead of me in school. So, I mean, I don't think that was also a coincidence. It could have been anybody else. So, it was just about finding the right person for the job. But there were other people, Ghanaians, but most of them were actually just miners. They had worked in a mine, in mining engineers, had a lot of mining experience, but had very little finance experience, very little equity experience, very little private equity and investment experience. So that didn't work well.
Okay, so we're going to get a second back of questions. On the what? Yes. Did we miss anything in the consultation process? And looking forward, is there some further consultation that needs to take place?
I mean, I think, as Minister mentioned, we did go through all of that. And I guess I want us to all realize this is not hasty, this is not rushed, because been working at this since 2018, in which has been very public with regards to parliamentary conduct. I'm sure we can always do more, as you are saying. And we are a government that, for the first time, Ministry of Finance has a partnership agreement with the trade union and labor, etc., in which we look at our economic policies before we even come out. So I really, and I keep a very open, door, and so I really would encourage a discussion with anyone. I saw one of the letters in which it talked about indecent haste and that there's no national emergency. If COVID is not a national emergency, I don't know what is. That there's a lot of, what do they call it? A lethal disadvantage to go to the stock market at this time. And this is the best time for the pricing of gold. I mean, if you take advantage of this, when else would you be able to? But I think, the issue that really was full and made me discount the letter was when they ended saying that we are trying to stop elite capture, which initially meant that we here are doing this for ourselves and we have some shares in that. So if that frames the mindset in which it was brought, it makes it really very difficult to see whether it is genuine or it's intended. Because you've seen us operate for 3.5 years, and what we have done is to follow this Akufo plan to make sure that everybody benefits. And so to talk about elite capture was for me a very painful issue. But thanks for the question, and truly I'm very open to a lot more discussions if that is. But I'm very clear at the right time to do it. I'm very clear that we're going to get best valuation. I'm also very clear that in reimagining ourselves as Ghanaians, we need to begin to think at a higher level in order and push us to even more. So as we sit, Agyapa is 100% owned by me, which is 100% owned by government, and there are no hidden beneficiaries in that regard. It is a clean transaction as far as I know that we are going to make sure it is done, and we are just looking for ways to maximize value and to play in the game that our multinationals play in, and now we have the skill set to be able to do that. So once we begin the process of listing all over, and it's going to be listed both in London and in Ghana, and we've done that before with Anglo Gold, Ashanti, etc. So it's also not a mystery in a sense to do that. The transaction, as far as I know, has been as transparent as you can be it. It's gone to Parliament on many levels, gone to Cabinet on any levels, and there's truly nothing to hide. It's creating something new. That may be uncomfortable, but it is something new that is going to stand us in great order. I remember being on Wall Street and companies like Barrick starting, and within an issue of a decade becoming the largest companies in the world. It is in the same way that we envision here, and that this Agyapa is going to be the largest company in Africa in the mineral resource place if we manage it right with the type of people that we are making sure are going to be custodians for this.
Mr. Great, we'll take the final batch of questions. Before we do, colleagues, I'll draw your attention to the law that was passed in 2018, Section 35 of the law. And I'll crave your indulgence to raise it in your discussions and your analysis. Just, Minister, with your permission, if I read. As the mineral income paid to the fund and the dividend payable by the fund or a special purpose vehicle, in this case Agyapa, are not taxable. We passed this law in Parliament in 2018. All of us were there when we passed this law, when the government explained the structure of this kind of transaction. So it beggars belief that in the end, all of these things are raised as though something is being hidden under a table. Who passed a law to do something opaque? We'll take a final batch of questions. Yes, sir. 1, 2, Bloomberg 3, and then I'll give you the final one, and then we'll wrap up. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Ogbete. I work with GT. Since this approach of monetizing our gold royalties is so effective and innovative, are we likely to see an extension of same in our oil and gas royalties?
So my name is Kweku Tim and I report for GH1 TV. I want to find out from you, so in your deliberations, you've called this unique, you've called it one of the best deals that had as a nation. The fact checks is done from the Deputy Minister, what we've seen, we're all going to do our fact check. But I want to find out if tomorrow I should find out that indeed this part of the deal was not too clear. I want to know my flexibilities with the law. Has this been situated in a way that I cannot go to court around it legally? Or at the end of the day, because another myth is that this whole deal is shredded so that you cannot sue if you do they will come back to you and that Ghana is going to pay so much for it. So it's shredded in a way that you cannot sue eventually. Then again, my second part comes to, so when you hear a section of the nations, this whole deal, when we come, we will cancel it because it's not in good faith. How do you respond directly to such individuals? Because I commented on it at all. Thank you.
Thank you. These questions, whether or not it is true that anybody is giving immunities or anybody is barred from taking legal action against any of the parties in this transaction, because that's a claim out there. Is it true that anybody is barred from taking legal action against anybody? And what do you make of the threats from the opposition and threats to international investors not to participate? Yeah, Bloomberg.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Akol. Bloomberg is my media house. Honorable, just as a first line, will you please be generous to give us a copy of the presentation? Because I know some of us, the media, don't have too much grasp with this issue. So it helps us to better contextualize in our reportage so we don't get it wrong. Okay, that's just a first plea. And 2, couldn't we have established domiciled here in Ghana and then tax exempted? Or did we have to go to jail so that to sort of avoid the UK authorities imposing taxes upon our taxes? Maybe then what superior really reason do we have going to Jersey as against having a domicile here in Ghana?
Very well. So couldn't we an international version of the company? You do know the company is in 2 levels. There's one in Ghana and then there's an international one. Couldn't we have done more or less both in Ghana, or just stayed with the one in Ghana and given the tax exemptions? Final question was from somebody else, was it? From you, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Philip Imate, City Bishop. Just some 2 questions. If we would kindly get the full list of members on the Agyapa Royalties board, I think that would help us. And also, how true is it that royalties have been assigned to Agyapa into the indefinite future? That is what we know, that for some number of years the investors will be benefiting from the royalties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you able to provide us the list of board members for Agyapa? And then secondly, is it true that there's an indefinite assignment of the royalties? And maybe, or is there a time cap that these royalties have been assigned for 10 years or 15 years, or is it indefinite? And then what that? I have a question myself, please forgive me. Let's talk about 16 concessions or 16 mining companies, and then we are hearing about 12. Can you just explain so that somebody doesn't say at first they 16, now they say 12, so somebody's lying? Thank you.
I'll try on some of these. And Charles, I think the first question was from Morris on the effectiveness and innovativeness of that, and whether you extend it to, I guess, other resources, but specifically oil and gas. I think really, a continual search for the best way in which we can use, our resources and the timing in which it should be done. So we'll leave that open and really ensure that whatever resources we have, are maximized for us. You talked about the suing. I'm not sure anybody can buy anybody from suing. So I wouldn't worry about that right. The issue, I think it was maybe 93, when the country listed Ashanti Goldfields, and it was just an intensely, divisive period. But in the end, that was good for that moment, and it got done. But the challenge for me is, the opposition has been aware of this transaction since 2018 and have been part of the discussions, negotiations, etc. I can only hazard that because it's close to elections, they may feel that there's a political advantage of some sort. But it's not hasty, it's not new. And I saw some of them in committee discussions, so obviously in which they were supportive of all of that. So there must be a new element, and the only element I can see is 102 days away, when December 6th. And so, but they are doing their job as opposition, so we can do that. Presentation, I'm sure Charles can work on sharing some of that. In terms of it being domiciled here, when you are listing on the London Stock Exchange, you are basically trying to maximize your value. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's an issue of geography that sometimes clouds the sense of the value of the entity. And then there are also jurisdictions that investors are used to as coming from there to the market. So it is in looking at all of these options that makes us place as Guernsey or Jersey, and we took with Jersey for that. Do you want to the indefinite future and all of that, but I think we should understand that we are creating a company that is going to, be a going concern, and even as certain leases, come to the end of the concession, we also would have had resources buying other entities around Africa or wherever we want to go. So it's really quite expansive where we'll end up. Charles, if you can take that up.
Sure. Yes, a lot of when you get a concession from the Minerals Commission. When you get a concession, you go out and do your exploration, you discover gold, you then do your evaluation, and then you confirm your reserves. Unless you find 200,000 ounces of reserves, and you demand whatever 100,000 a year or 50,000 a year, that means your lease will end in 4 years or 5 years. I think the average lives of our leases are around 10, 11, 2 years. So essentially, that is what it is today. But the company, as the minister said, is in the business of procuring new royalty flows. So the understanding is that the company that will be living to perpetuity, but as some leases are expiring, some new ones are coming, and so on, and it's ongoing. So really, you just look at it as a portfolio of royalties that keeps changing over time as some fall off and some come on. So that's that. Yeah. With regards to what was the other thing? Oh, that one minister answered it. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. And then there was a thing about the companies. We have 16 royalty flows that are being assigned to Agyapa. Of those 16, 12 are producing, and there are 4 that are in development stage. So these are the typical ones that, as I said, they need money, complete the development, and start producing. Those 4 are Namdini, which is owned by Cardinal Resources, is up in the northern part of Ghana. Very, very positive find. There's the Wild Gold project, which is owned by Azuma Resources. There's the Bibiani one, which is owned by Resolute Mining. And there's the Enchi project, which is owned by Pinecrest Resources. So those are the 4 which would start producing soon, but are now at the development stage.
What I think Charles showed it on the screen is that even the 16 do not give us majority of royalties that the country earns. It's really important to realize that it's not all of the royalties that the country earns that are going into this new structure. It's important to know that. And so one should not be in haste to prejudge this. Thank you.
You said the board members will be in the practice.
Yes, the board, and that's another thing. We have to be sensitive because the listing rules are quite stringent. So actually in a quiet period, so there's not a lot that we can't really talk about. And until the prospectus has been submitted to the regulators, both here in London, and approved, we can't really discuss the board members, so to speak. There are some statutory positions on the board, though, which are filled by the Mining Income Investment Fund members. I think the CEO and one board member have an automatic seat on the Agyapa board. So whoever CEO of the Mining Income Investment Fund is a board member, and one other board member is nominated. And so those are government's representation on the board. Other than that, the details will all be spelled out in the prospectus. As soon as the prospectus is approved by the regulators here in the UK, it will be available to all investment banks that will be marketing the deal. They will share it to all prospective buyers in Ghana. You all get a just like with the MTN transaction and so on and so on. So, and everything will be in there, your board members, the total amount of transaction fees that we are paying to all the advisors, and the prospective mines, the list of the 16 mines that we're looking at, and everything. So that will be there. Also, with regards to the presentation I just gave, I've just been passed a note that is according to the listing rules, I cannot give it to you. Maybe what we can do is see if we can put together a more sanitized version that is not, the lawyers will sign off of and say, so now it is within the disclosure rules to be able to give you that. We'll pass that over if that's okay with you.
Honourable Minister, we want to thank you for your time, yourself, your deputy, for giving us this education. I understand you have some other business to attend to, so you'll be taking leave of us. Colleagues, we have a problem with our COVID management situation in this country currently. That's why the Ghana Health Service boss and his team are here. Indulge them some 5-10 minutes. They will explain the nature of the problem and what we have to do to solve it. The Honourable Minister and his colleagues will be taking leave of us to attend to some other matters. So if you can just reposition your microphones for the Ghana Health Service team. They will explain the nature of the problem and how to deal with it. Very quickly, please reposition your microphones. Okay. Doc, come this way. He will quickly do a projection of what the challenge is. He will quickly do a projection up on the screen of what the challenge is and what needs to be done to help deal with it. Because if I remember, just take it. You just do it.